and Susan Milner, and we're about to read chapter 19 of book number 1, A Healing in Jesus' Name. Let's see, we are still in New Orleans. On the sidelines, Eric hugged her and Ricky gave her a thumbs up, but Shelley still wasn't smiling. She knew she was going to have to face Casey eventually, and it wasn't a pleasant thought. She struggled to quell her fear. Please, please, let me draw the bye in round 4, she silently pleaded. Round 4 came, however, and the bye went to the girl who had just fought and won. Okay, Eric said calmly, as usual. That leaves you and Casey. Why don't you protest this fight, Dad? I mean, she's a black belt and... never mind. I know the answer, Ricky said sheepishly, looking around at the raised eyebrows of his father and Justin and Jason. Eric nodded at Shelley. Black belt means nothing. Let it go. Just go out there and beat her. I know you can do it, and I want you to know that you can do it. Besides, it'll be good experience for you, since the purpose of this tournament is not to win, but to learn and prepare you for the mart. And that's my opinion. Do you want me to protest? Shelley's face was tense. There was no denying that she was afraid to face Casey, and that she'd love to get out of it. Still, she'd already fought her once and won. So she shook her head. I'll always wonder if I could have beaten her. Besides, I owe her. Eric smiled. That's my girl. Okay, then, huddle up, Ricky said, smiling. Here's the plan. All 5 friends gathered together, interested in hearing Ricky's word of wisdom. Don't get heat, Ricky said in a thick accent, quoting Mr. Miyagi's line in Karate Kid. They all groaned. I'll take care of this, Jason said as he lifted Ricky upside down and carried him toward the trash can. The spectators who noticed loved their antics, but Shelley wasn't amused, and Eric took her by the hand and walked her around. Shelley? We have no films for Casey, so you tell me, what are her weaknesses? I don't think she has any, Shelley said with a sigh. He shook his head. Everyone has weaknesses. Like maybe she's overconfident, Eric suggested. Well, maybe. And maybe a little slower than me, Shelley added. Or possibly out of shape, she allowed. Okay, good, Eric said, nodding his head. Well, she's ruthless, we know that, and she'll probably go for illegal punches that could hurt you. So you have to keep the left hand high and ready. Protect the eyes and throat. Listen to me if you can. As I pick things up, I'll let you know. But remember, counter kicks and defense. She nodded, but a figure behind Eric caught Shelley's eye. They turned to see Mickey standing there, sporting a black eye. Excuse me, he said timidly. I just wanted to tell Shelley that I'm sorry. I didn't really mean to cause any harm. I needed the money. I guess I sort of got involved with the wrong people. He turned to walk away and then stopped and turned back. You know, I wouldn't have really hurt you. You know, I wouldn't have let it go any further than, well, you know, riding on you. Well, you may not have been able to control the others, Eric chided. Mickey nodded, conceding the point. You're right. I'll make it up to you somehow. He turned and walked away. Shelley said nothing. She didn't know what to say. She tried to refocus her mind on the fight, and Eric looked into her eyes. My little warrior, you can do this. Just keep in mind, dirty dishes and laundry and dusting and vacuuming. She sneered at him and walked out on the mat. As usual, Eric turned out right. The first kick Casey connected was to Shelley's kneecap. She went down, rolled over, and came back up. She bounced a little, testing the sore joint. The 2 women began a staggering exchange of punches and kicks. Shelley was barely able to keep up with the offensive onslaught Casey was throwing at her. Finally, a glancing right hand to the throat sent Shelley down again. She jumped back up, coughing, and the official warned Casey, who was smiling a wicked smile. Between rounds, Eric spoke to her. Clear your mind, Shelley. You should have seen that coming. Roll and trap. When she advances, use your jumping sidekick. Stand still, dig in, and let her come. Shelley did as she was told. The roll and trap was almost too easy. Shelley smashed her forearm into Casey's mouth, and Casey staggered away, and Shelley dug in again, allowing Casey to come at her. Casey glared at Shelley, blood running from her mouth. She charged and in. Shelley jumped high into the air and directed a side kick to Casey's ribs, but Casey was able to sidestep. Instinctively, Shelley turned and fired a back kick the moment she came down, catching Casey in the chest, and Casey staggered again, and Shelley knew it would be her chance. She spun around and landed a roundhouse to the ribs, spun again, landing a hook kick to the head, and then moved in to fire a punch to the nose and a right hand to the temple. But Casey still didn't go down, but instead stood grinning at Shelley. Clearly frustrated, Shelley jumped high again, and with a thundering ki, she plowed a sidekick into Casey's midsection. She went down and didn't get up. Shelley stood over her a moment, then turned her back and walked off the mat, bowing to the judges and the crowd. The entire audience was on their feet, cheering and whistling. Eric smiled at her as she approached and motioned toward the cheering crowd. "That's for you, babe." Surprised, Shelley looked up and then shook her head. "More like for your student." Eric hugged her. "Except for that last remark, I'm proud of you." Finally, she smiled. "Where are the guys?" Shelley asked Eric. "They're preparing for their demonstration." "They missed me beating KC?" Eric smiled. "What do you think?" She nodded with a smile. "So what's next?" "Well, as soon as all the divisions catch up and everyone is down to their final championship round, Ricky's demo is on, and then, my lovely warrior, it will be your turn." Shelley looked up at her teacher, Master Kino. "Do you think I even have a chance?" He pulled her close, encircling her waist with his arms. "Yes, grasshopper, I do. Are you still feeling mean?" "No, I'm just sweaty and tired and a little hungry." Eric ran his hands through her hair, above her braid. "Well, I can find a place for you to rest. I can wipe the sweat from your brow, and I'd be happy to make you feel mean again. However, you'll just have to stay hungry, especially with your tendency to get nauseated." Shelley giggled. "Well, if I can't have it all, I don't want any." She grabbed a drink and a towel and sat down to watch the demonstration. She loved to watch Ricky Kino do his thing, and with Jason and Justin helping him, this should be a real treat. Surprisingly, Angel came to sit with her. "Are you okay?" Shelley asked her. "Oh, I'm fine. I'm just not used to losing." She paused and smiled. "I was watching you and Eric a minute ago. You two are truly in love, aren't you?" Shelley smiled. "I'd gladly and willingly give my life for him." "Well, that's good to know," Eric quipped as he came to sit on the other side of Shelley, "but hardly necessary." He possessively placed his hand on Shelley's knee, and she was grateful for his thoughtfulness, because he knew that Shelley had been jealous of Angel, and this was his way of showing his devotion to her in front of Angel. Somehow, though, it didn't seem important anymore, because Shelley had won Angel's respect. They watched the demonstration together and delighted in the antics of the three warriors on the floor. Shelley called them the three warrior stooges since they'd incorporated a good deal of slapstick comedy into their routine, including a bit where they're trying to build a house but keep accidentally breaking the boards. It was a wonderful and hilarious demonstration of skills, but when it was over, Shelley began to get anxious again. The championship rounds for the different divisions would be fought one at a time in the center arena, and Shelley would be third after the 2 brown belt matches. She walked away to stretch. When she came back, the guys had joined Angel. "You guys were great," Shelley called up to them. "Thanks," Ricky answered. "Of course, it was rather difficult to follow your act." "Oh, yeah, right." Eric spun her around. "Okay, let's get down to business. Your opponent's name is Kathy Chow. She's strong and she's fast. Actually, she reminds me of you. Her kicks are powerful and she's not as good with her fists, just like you. Though not for long," he added. "Soon we'll turn your weaknesses into strengths. Strike hard, strike fast, center and focus, hands up, strong defense, watch her eyes and waist." Finally, they were introduced. They bowed, faced the judges, bowed, faced each other, and bowed. The 2 women turned out to be evenly matched. Kathy was a good martial artist, a clean fighter, and Shelley was actually enjoying the match as one would appreciate a worthy tennis opponent. It was a pleasure to face someone who was really good and not out to kill her. Trying to figure her next moves and outsmart her, though, was no easy task, and Shelley found herself fighting the most difficult fight thus far in her career. They traded kicks and punches, sometimes connecting, but mostly blocking. The fight seemed to go on for hours. Shelley delivered a jumping, spinning back kick to the crowd's delight, but Kathy countered with 2 side kicks in a row, the second one connecting with Shelley's stomach. They continued this maneuvering and kicking, maneuvering and punching. The time factor was becoming evident, and Shelley was getting tired, and Eric knew it. "Take her down," he called. She obeyed him. As Kathy came forward, Shelley dove under the punch, grabbing Kathy around the waist, placing her leg behind Kathy's. She forced her down onto her back and delivered a stout backhand to the diaphragm. Kathy rolled over, though, and rose even before Shelley. Shelley panted as she stood. They exchanged several more rounds before Kathy finally caught Shelley off balance and drove her side kick straight into Shelley's face. The mat felt heavenly as Shelley landed on it. She'd be happy to stay right there. Reluctantly, she rolled over, resting her cheek against the smooth material as she did. She stood again, shakily. She was so tired, her legs and arms would barely do what she commanded. Kathy was also feeling the fatigue, Shelley thought, or she would have finished her by now. The spectators were on their feet, cheering in admiration for the 2 lady warriors who had fought so valiantly for so long. Unfortunately, Shelley had no energy left. She moved forward for one last effort. Within a few seconds, she was on her back again. She willed herself to move, but her body simply would not obey her mind. She closed her eyes in defeat as she heard the official declare Ms. Chow the champion. Kathy came to Shelley, helped pull her to her feet, and hugged her. The spectators showed their respect and appreciation for both women. Shelley had definitely won the approval of the crowd. Back with her entourage, she immersed herself in the comforting hugs and smiles of the men she'd grown to love so much. "Not enough energy from too much partying," Ricky chided. "Will I ever live that down?" "Oh, not any time soon, I'm sure," Justin answered. Shelley sighed. "You know what? I am so tired and so hungry, and I'm thinking Angel and I will go take a quick shower, and you guys can take us out to eat." Angel's eyes lit up at the thought of being included. The guys all bowed and quoted the same words from the same movie. "As you wish." Shelley took Angel's arm. "Come on, let's go get gorgeous." Loosening her long hair from the braid she usually wore, Shelley went straight to the shower. The warm water felt soothing on her tired, aching muscles. She smiled to herself. She didn't win, but she'd made it through a bare-knuckles tournament without blood, without a concussion, and her head was still connected to her body. Meanwhile, the men stood in the lobby waiting for Angel and Shelley while keeping an eye on the red belt men's competition and talking about how well Shelley fought. "Well, she's come a long way since the first time I saw her fight in Daytona," Jason remarked. Eric nodded. "But even then, you could tell she had a lot of potential," he added. "Oh, she's something else," Justin agreed. "She hasn't won a tournament yet, though. Is she in line with where you want her to be?" "Oh, she's right on. She's done better than winning. She's learning from every mistake, from every loss. She soaks up information like a computer. She's tough." "Did you notice there were no tears from losing today?" "That's because she feels like a winner. And to me, she is. I have a strong inclination to believe that she will be a champion." "Don't say that, Dad. You might jinx yourself." Eric frowned. "Oh, that's a mind game you don't need to play. Speak only truth, and you'll be okay." Ricky laughed. "You're a poet." Jason rolled his eyes and slapped the back of Ricky's head. And in the locker room, Shelley talked herself into leaving the comfort of the shower. Wrapping one towel around her hair and another around her body, she stepped around to her locker. She heard Angel still talking to some of the other competitors, so she poked her head around to the row of lockers closest to the door. "Hey, Angel, I'm starved, and if you don't go get your shower now, we're going to leave you." "Don't leave," Angel cried. I'm going right now." She said goodbye to the girl she'd been jabbering with and quickly headed toward the shower. Shelley sat down on the bench in front of her locker, too tired to stand while she dressed. Thinking about how the crowd had cheered for her brought a smile to her lips. The locker room had become quiet except for the water running back where Angel showered. The silence brought a delicious feeling of peace. She was exhausted, yet euphoric. Having accomplished putting on her underclothing and shirt, she tried to decide whether she should actually stand up to put on her jeans or just sit a moment longer. Choosing to sit, she took a deep breath and began to hum. Bending over, she took the wet towel from her head and shook out her hair. She existed in a world that was happy, carefree, secure, and warm. But the cold, hard steel of Casey's gun on her temple brought Shelley quickly back to the violent world she actually lived in. New scene. The girls, who moments before had been talking to Angel, ran from the locker room yelling something about someone with a gun in the women's locker room. The 4 men who stood in the lobby heard a commotion and asked one of the girls what was going on. A woman came into the dressing room. She has a gun. She told us to leave, but there's still people in there, she shrieked. The men ran, reaching the door at the same time as several police and security officers. New scene. Don't move. Don't even breathe, Casey ordered. Shelley stared straight ahead, her heart pounding. Either Casey had lost her mind completely, or James Crane had ordered Shelley dead. It didn't matter. Either way, a gun was pointed at her head, and the danger was very real. We're going for a little walk, Casey stated. Shelley tried to reason with her. At any minute, someone could come through that door. Why don't you just put the gun away and we'll talk about this? You don't have to do this. Casey grinned. Oh, I locked the bolt lock and lifted the keys from the maintenance guy, and they're the only keys in the place, so no one is coming in to save you. Shelley's stomach roiled. She could hear someone pounding on the door. Did Eric know her predicament? Would Casey really kill her? The keys Casey had couldn't possibly be the only ones. Shoving her head, Casey pushed her back toward the showers. Unexpectedly, Angel appeared, dripping wet, wrapping a towel around herself, and she looked up, startled. The adrenaline pumped through Shelley's body. Oh, God, Angel cried. Shelley tensed. She could feel Casey's hand shaking through the gun. You're about to be one of those statistics, Casey said to Angel. You know, the one about the unlucky victim who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. She pointed the gun at Angel. No! Shelley lunged at Casey as Casey pulled the trigger. Shelley grabbed Casey's hand as the gun went off, and she pushed Casey up against a wall, and Angel fell to the floor. Shelley slammed Casey's hand against the tile wall again and again. The gun fired once more before it finally fell, and Shelley immediately kicked it out of reach. It slid the distance of the locker room and came to rest under one of the sinks in the front far corner. Shelley drew back and punched Casey in the stomach, grabbed her by the hair, and smashed Casey's face into her knee, and Casey slid down the wall to the hard floor. Shelley started toward the gun, but Casey grabbed her ankles as she went by, and Shelley tumbled downward. They grappled on the floor for several minutes, rolling over and over, each one trying to get the upper hand. Casey got it first, slamming the back of Shelley's head into a locker. Shelley was dazed long enough for Casey to wriggle free. Casey turned to crawl away, but Shelley grabbed her by the foot and pulled her back, twisting Casey's ankle until she flipped over onto her back. Shelley sprang up, pummeling Casey's face with her fist until both were bloody. Struggling to stand, Shelley started again toward the gun, leaning on one of the sinks for support. Somehow, though, Casey rose once more, screamed her frustration as she grabbed Shelley by the hair and swung her with all her might into the mirror. Pain shot through Shelley's forehead, and blood poured, covering her face, essentially blinding her. Wiping at her eyes in an effort to see, she stumbled away from the mirror. Casey grabbed her from behind, pinning her arms to her sides. Throughout her training, Eric had preached about utilizing the axe kick, and she kept forgetting. But she remembered now. Kicking as high and hard as she could, Shelley's foot bashed into Casey's forehead. Casey released her as she slumped to the floor, landing on her back, and Shelley lifted her foot and stomped on Casey's stomach, and she wiped at her eyes, struggling to see as she stepped over Casey's unconscious body. Not unconscious, Shelley thought, as Casey tripped her and Shelley landed on the hard floor, and they each scrambled toward the gun, reaching toward the corner. Casey grabbed Shelley by the hair. End it, Shelley thought, her logical mind kicking in. Stop going for the gun and take care of what stands in your way. She maneuvered onto Casey's abdomen, straddling her. Barely able to see what she was doing through the blood that ran from her forehead, she swung at Casey's face over and over until finally Casey stopped moving. Shelley reached toward the gun once again, but it wasn't there. She wiped madly at her eyes, trying desperately to see. She blinked hard, and there it was, in Casey's outstretched hand. With trembling hands, Shelley reached forward and scooped it up. She then pointed it at the head of the woman that Shelley had once thought was a new friend. New scene. When the gun fired, Eric's heart stopped. Not being able to get to Shelley was absolute, pure agony. He thought he'd go out of his mind before Ricky found keys and came back to open the large, heavy door. When he saw Ricky running full speed toward him, keys held high, a slight relief washed over him. Relief, and also dread as to what they would find on the other side. A security officer grabbed the keys from Ricky, and 2 police officers, weapons drawn, shoved Eric and Ricky aside as they waited for the door to open. They burst through the door. Angel lay on the floor in a puddle of blood. Shelley sat in her pink tailored shirt on the abdomen of an unconscious Casey, pointing a gun at her head, and all Eric could see, though, was that Shelley still lived and breathed. Blood covered Shelley's face and shirt. She hadn't even noticed that they'd entered the room. The police had their weapons drawn and pointed at Shelley, and one spoke, "Put the gun down! Now!" Eric was incredulous. "Put your guns away, you idiots," he ordered, his voice like thunder. He walked past them slowly and into Shelley's line of vision. "Shelley," he said softly. "Shelley, give me the gun." He moved toward her slowly. She looked up at him. "Give me the gun, hon," he coaxed, as he covered her hand with his and gently took it from her. He slid it across the room toward the police officers. Before Eric had a chance to take her in his arms, 2 officers came at Shelley and pushed her roughly down, face first, onto the floor and handcuffed her. Eric tried to stop them. He tried to explain that it hadn't been Shelley who'd first brandished the weapon, but they wouldn't listen to him. They turned her onto her side. The look of confusion and fear on her face devastated Eric. Meanwhile, Jason knelt beside Angel as the EMTs worked on her, and Angel opened her eyes to find Jason smiling at her. "You're going to be okay." "Thanks to Shelley," she whispered. "She saved my life. That woman was going to kill me." "Did you hear what she said?" Ricky cried to the police officers. "Get a freaking clue. It wasn't Shelley who shot her. It was KC. Now let her go." "Hey, you just calm down," the officer that cuffed Shelley snapped. "We'll get to the bottom of this down at the station. For now, she stays as she is. And as for you, movie star or not, you're not in charge here, so keep your mouth shut or leave." Ricky's eyes narrowed. No one had ever dared accuse Ricky of using his star status for special treatment. No one with any brains, anyway. He was trying hard to control his temper, and Jason touched his arm. "Let it go, Rick." The officer roughly pulled Shelley from the floor and pushed her down to sit on a bench, and Shelley looked around her blankly. Realizing that she could barely see through the blood, Eric grabbed a towel and knelt in front of her and gently wiped the blood from her face. Disoriented, she looked up at him. "What is happening? Why did they handcuff me?" "Because they're stupid," Eric answered, matter-of-factly and loud enough for the officers to hear. "Eric, you're not making my job any easier," Justin firmly reminded him. Shelley watched them take Angel out to the ambulance. "Is she going to be okay?" Shelley asked. "I think she's going to be just fine," Eric answered. Next, they rolled a moaning KC out, and Eric knew that they would take Shelley soon. "Shelley, listen to me," Eric said, trying to get her attention. She looked at him and nodded blankly. "The police are going to want you to ride in their patrol car," he said softly, bracing for her reaction. Her chin began to quiver, and Eric's heart began to break. And Ricky cursed and then looked heavenward and apologized. "I need my things from my locker," she said softly. "I'll get them," Ricky offered quickly. "Eric, can I put on my jeans?" she asked in a tiny voice. "Of course you can," Eric answered, silently cursing himself for not thinking about protecting her modesty earlier, and daring an officer to stop him. He helped her dress. Tugging at the cuffs, Shelley tried to swing her hair out of her face, and Eric pulled the mass of wet, matted, bloody curls behind her. "They're going to take you to the hospital, Shelley, and I'm going to be right behind you, okay?" Eric said gently. She didn't respond, and Eric rose to speak to the arresting officer. "She's in shock, and you'd better hope that nothing happens to her while she's in the back of your patrol car, because if anything happens to her, I swear I'll—" Justin grabbed Eric before he had a chance to finish and pressed him against the locker. "We are not going to threaten the nice policeman," Justin said in a fatherly tone. "And you are not helping me. I have to work with these people to get her out of this. Now get a grip." Eric breathed and nodded. They took Shelley through the lobby and outside. The officer put her in the patrol car and closed the door, and she looked like a little lost puppy as she gazed out the window. Jason and Justin spoke briefly. Jason took Angel's car and left. The media called to Ricky to fill them in on what happened. Justin pulled him aside first. He knew Ricky had a way with the press. Listen, make it good enough to get her out, he said, before he left for the hospital with Eric. New scene. Sorry. Ricky held his hands up to quiet the crowd and the press. Well, I'll tell you what happened, he said, and knowing the media, he added, but you have to be quiet and listen to the whole story or no deal. Anyone tries to talk over me, I'm done. After that, Ricky's charm and intelligence came into play. A woman named K.C., he began as he told the entire story. And so the police arrested Ms. Adams, only to follow procedure. After all, she was the one holding the gun in the end. I'm sure they realized she saved Angel Pritchard's life, and her own too. And once they get all the statements from everyone, they'll release her. As a matter of fact, they'll probably give her some sort of commendation. He asked if anyone could give him a lift to the hospital, and dozens volunteered, and he chose a gorgeous brunette standing close by. New scene. Eric arrived at the hospital and found Shelley sitting on the edge of a gurney in the hallway, an expression of utter bewilderment on her face. Her handcuffs were still in place, and the arresting officers stood close by. Eric approached, his eyes daring them to say anything as he put his arm around Shelley. I am so tired, she said as she leaned her sore head on his shoulder. Well, here, why don't you lie down on your side, he suggested, forcing one of the officers to step aside as he helped her lay down. She curled up and closed her eyes. A few minutes later, a nurse came to check on her and demanded they take the cuffs off so that she could treat her. They rolled her into a larger room and pulled the curtains. Eric stayed with her, again daring anyone to deny him. I don't think she needs stitches, the doctor said. There are several small cuts along the hairline. We'll clean it up and disinfect the area and bandage it. The doctor took Eric aside to speak to him. Her blood pressure is low, and she's suffering from shock, but it's not bad enough to keep her here. I'm afraid they're going to take her down and book her. Eric thanked the doctor for his kindness and concern. The doctor and a nurse worked quickly. The doctor took his leave, and the nurse went to get paperwork. And as they waited, Ricky and Justin barged in, passing the officers with attorney privilege. How's Angel? Eric asked Justin. She's in surgery. The bullet hit no arteries, but took out a piece of her spleen. It missed her spine by a few inches. The doctor says she's lucky and should recover quickly. Eric filled them in on Shelley's condition, and then turned to her, dreading the next words he would have to speak. They're going to take you down to the police station for a little while, he said, as gently as he could. She bit her lip to keep it from trembling. Am I? She began, but stopped as the tears welled up in her eyes. She bit her lip again until she was able to fight the tears back, then tried to speak. Am I going to jail? She whispered. Eric found himself fighting his own emotions. He knew he had to tell her the truth because she trusted him, so he drew a deep breath. Yes, Shelley, you are, he said, placing his hand gently on her face. But only for a little while, he added quickly. I know this is hard, sweetie, but I want you to be brave. Can you do that for me? She nodded. Then, stopping to change direction, she shook her head, her eyes filling with fear. No, I can't do this, she said, the tears finally spilling over onto her cheeks. She put her arms around him. Please don't let them take me. Please, Eric, I just want to stay with you, she pleaded through her tears. He held her a moment. Shelley, if there was any way in the world I could keep you from having to do this, I swear I would. But there isn't. I can't stop the process. I promise to have you out soon. Jason's already working on it, and Justin will take care of everything else. Remember how we talked about creating your own reality? You can be in anguish or in control, so take control. Remember we talked about God is with us? Talk to him. He will help you find a way, my love, to turn this into something good. She sniffed. How do I take control? Eric smiled kindly. Well, if I tell you, then you won't learn how to do it. And you can do this. She shook her head. I didn't shoot Angel, she said. He hugged her hard. I know. Casey tried to kill me, she said, as if she thought someone ought to know that. I know, he said again, and they're going to question you, and you can tell your side, and Justin will be right beside you, and it'll all come out. Kissing her cheek, he held her until one of the officers came back from filling out the paperwork. He took her by the arm. "Let's go," he said gruffly. She stood up, and he turned her around and leaned her over the gurney, pulling her arms behind her to replace the handcuffs. Eric's eyes flashed with anger. "Is that really necessary?" "Sorry, it's policy. We wouldn't want her to do any further damage with her lethal weapons," he retorted sarcastically. Eric thought about how pleasant it would be to use his own lethal weapons to penetrate the man's throat and neatly tear out his Adam's apple. Justin kicked his leg, and Eric blinked. It was just a thought," he murmured innocently. They watched Shelley being led out the automatic door. She looked back at them, panic in her eyes, for just an instant, and then she turned and walked away with the officer. Blowing out a breath, Ricky leaned back against the wall. "I can't stand this," he murmured, his voice filled with emotion. And Eric placed his hand on Ricky's shoulder. "Well, if she can, you can. And she's tougher than you think. She always comes through when things are at their worst." They walked out through the emergency room, but stopped to listen to the news when they saw Ricky's face on the TV screen. And they smiled as they heard what Ricky said to the crowd and the reporters. "Man, I'm good," Ricky bragged. "You were perfect," Justin agreed. They both turned to look at Eric for his comment. Yeah, good shooting, kid. Don't get cocky," Eric quoted. "Star Wars," Justin said, glad to finally recognize one. And Eric grimaced. Playing Shelley's game in her absence was disturbing. They hurried to the police station. Isaiah chapter 54, verse 17. "No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is of me, saith the Lord." And that, my loves, is the end of chapter 19.